Previously on the keys of time.
We now have the keys that are necessary to start to systematically unveil the Bible's chronology. The first two keys revealed the divinely ordained blueprint or framework for time. Keys 1 and 2 basically say that the blueprint is a week of 7 days of 1,000 years each. The next two keys resulted in the discovery of God's redemption chronology, which exists alongside the Bible's actual chronology. Key 3 says, at the end of every Jubilee cycle of 49 actual years, God adds a special 50th year of grace. Key 4 is the principle of unreckoned time, which says that God does not count times when his people's sin causes his plan of redemption to be suspended. This is convincingly revealed by the 479 completed years recorded in 1 Kings 6:1, which are 131 years short of the actual time. Now, the total times of servitude are also 131 years. So if they are subtracted from the total time, this gives exactly 479 years. We will now look at the next 490-year Great Jubilee cycle in the chronology of redemption, from the dedication of Solomon's temple to the decree of Artaxerxes to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. After Solomon's death, Solomon's son Rehoboam decided to impose higher taxes. This prompted a revolt by the 10 northern tribes, leaving just the 2 southern tribes of Benjamin and Judah loyal to Rehoboam. The result was a divided kingdom, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. For both kingdoms we're told how long each of their kings reigned and when they started their reign. The start of a reign is given in terms of the reign of the king in the other kingdom. This is called a synchronism. Moreover, Judah and Israel had different ways of measuring time. For example, there's the issue of whether they used accession years or not. And then there's the issue of whether they used Nisan or Tishri-based years. And then there's the issue of whether there were co-regencies and interregnums. The second reason for the difficulty of this period is in the connection of Israel's chronology with that of the surrounding nations which interacted with her, especially Egypt and Assyria and Babylon. The primary chronology we need to follow is that of Judah. The two kingdoms used different methods to measure the reigns of their kings. The first issue is when a king began counting the official years of his reign. The reigns of kings are given in whole numbers of years. There are 2 possibilities. The first method was the accession year system. The previous year in which he came to the throne was called his accession year. Only when the next year began did he enter his first official regnal year. So, the year in which the previous king died was counted to him as a complete year, even though he only ruled for part of it. Now, the second method was the non-accession year system. Here, there is no accession year, but the king counts the year in which he began to reign as his first year, even though he only reigned for part of it. As before, he also counts his final year as a complete year. On the non-accession year system, any transitional years are counted twice. The second issue is which month was used for the start of the official year for a king's reign. Nisan, which is the first month of the calendar year, or Tishri, which is the 7th month of the calendar year. Now we come to one of Judah's better-known kings, Jehoshaphat. The sole reign of Jehoshaphat over Judah was 22 years. However, for 3 years before that, he was co-regent with his father Asa. So the total length of his reign was 25 years. Let's read this from 1 Kings 22, 41 and 42. Jehoshaphat, the son of Asa, had become king over Judah in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel. Jehoshaphat reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. Although we're told Jehoshaphat reigned for 25 years, other scriptures require that the first 3 of these years were as co-regent with his father Asa. This 3-year joint reign would have been in Asa's 39th year. The explanation for this co-regency is that Asa became ill in his 39th year. We read about that in 2 Chronicles 16:12. Asa, in the 39th year of his reign, was diseased in his feet, until his disease was exceeding great. Asa appointed Jehoshaphat co-regent in this 39th year. The proof of this co-regency is from 2 Kings 8:16, which says, "Now in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, having been king of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, began to reign as king of Judah." According to this, Jehoshaphat's reign only lasted 22 years. The explanation is that Jehoshaphat reigned as co-regent with his father Asa for 3 years, from the 2nd year of Ahab, before he began his sole reign in the 4th year of Ahab, which then lasted 22 years. 1 Kings 22, 41 and 42, that we read earlier, and which says that Jehoshaphat became king over Judah in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel, and reigned 25 years in Jerusalem, is another example of dual dating, because the synchronism is for the sole reign, but the reign length given in this passage includes the co-regency. Jehoshaphat fortified the cities of Judah and the cities of Ephraim, which his father Asa had previously captured. He sought after the God of his father David, and he walked in his commandments. So the Lord established his kingdom, and the people honored him with gifts. He removed some of the high places and wooden images from Judah, but we read in 1 Kings 22:43 that the people resisted.
And he walked in all the ways of his father Asa. He did not turn aside from them, doing what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away, for the people offered sacrifices and burnt incense on the high places.
He sent his leaders into all the cities of Judah to teach the people from the law of Moses. He built castles and store cities, and the economy of Judah thrived. The greatest mistake of Jehoshaphat's reign was his alliance with Ahab, the idolatrous king of Israel. We read in 2 Kings 11, 1-3, that the marriage of his son Jehoram to Ahab's daughter Athaliah nearly proved to be disastrous for Judah later on, after Jehoshaphat's death. After a narrow escape from the battle of Ramoth-Gilead, which we find described in 2 Chronicles 18:31, the prophet Jehu rebuked Jehoshaphat for this unholy alliance. Jehoshaphat turned his attention back to reform in Judah. He reorganized the legal system by appointing judges in key cities and an appeal court in Jerusalem, which we can read about in 2 Chronicles 19, 4-11. After Ahab's death in Israel, Jehoshaphat entered into a maritime commerce alliance with Ahab's son Ahaziah in order to trade with Ophir for gold. But God put a stop to this by wrecking the ships. We read this story in 2 Chronicles 20, 35-37.
After this, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, allied himself with Ahaziah, king of Israel, who acted very wickedly. And he allied himself with him to make ships to go to Tarshish, and they made the ships in Etzion-Geber. But Eleazar, the son of Dodavah of Mareshah, prophesied against Jehoshaphat, saying, "Because you have allied yourself with Ahaziah, the Lord has destroyed your works." Then the ships were wrecked, so that they were not able to go to Tarshish.
Towards the end of his reign, the Moabites and surrounding nations attacked Jehoshaphat. He proclaimed a fast to seek God's help, and in response to their cry, the Spirit of the Lord famously came upon the Levite Jahaziel, and we read in 2 Chronicles 20:17, "You will not need to fight in this battle. Position yourselves. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, who is with you, O Judah and Jerusalem. Do not fear or be dismayed. Tomorrow go out against them, for the Lord is with you." God sent confusion into the enemy camps, who fought and destroyed each other. When the men of Judah arrived, only a mass of dead bodies and plunder remained. Following this, the fear of God came upon all the surrounding nations when they heard how the Lord had fought against the enemies of Jehoshaphat. The kingdom of Judah then enjoyed peace and rest on every border. Jehoshaphat was 60 when he died after a reign of 25 years and was succeeded by his son Jehoram, as we read in 1 Kings 22:42 and 50. Because he sought the Lord with all his heart, the kingdom of Judah was never more prosperous than under his reign. We read in 1 Kings 22:51 that in Israel, Ahaziah, who was Ahab's first son, reigned for 2 years after Ahab's death. Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, became king over Israel in Samaria in the 17th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and he reigned 2 years over Israel. This reign of 2 years was measured according to Jehoshaphat's sole reign of 22 years. Ahaziah led Israel into sin by continuing to serve Baal. Scripture provides little detail about his reign, but does provide an account of his death. Ahaziah was injured when he somehow fell through the roof in his palace. So he sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of diseases of Ekron, if he would recover. They were intercepted by Elijah the Tishbite, who prophesied that he would die because of his unbelief. Ahaziah died in his bed according to the word of the Lord, and because he had no son, his brother Jehoram ruled in his place. We read in 2 Kings 3:1 that Jehoram reigned for 12 years. Jehoram, the son of Ahab, became king over Israel at Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and reigned 12 years. There is also another synchronism for this Jehoram in 2 Kings 1:17, which says, "So Ahaziah died. Because he had no son, Jehoram became king in his place in the 2nd year of Jehoram the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah." This establishes a co-regency between Jehoshaphat and his son Jehoram, the next king of Judah, for the 18th year of Jehoshaphat is also the 2nd year of his son Jehoram. Thus, there was a co-regency from the 17th to the 22nd year of Jehoshaphat's sole reign. Jehoram, Ahaziah's brother, was the second son of Ahab. He removed the image of Baal made by his father, but he still continued in the sin of Jeroboam, which was the worship of the golden calf. He made an alliance with King Jehoshaphat of Judah and the king of Edom to subdue a Moabite rebellion. On the way to the battle, they were all caught in the wilderness of Edom without water. Elisha the prophet was called on for help, which he only gave because of the presence of Jehoshaphat. We read in 2 Kings 3:16-19 how Elisha prophesied that the Lord would deliver the Moabites into their hands. He caused ditches to be dug, which were filled by a flash flood the next morning. The Moabites, seeing the water was colored red due to the sandstone, mistook this for blood and presumed that the 3 kings had slaughtered each other. They descended on the camp to gather spoil, only to be surprised and killed. In Judah, Jehoshaphat was followed by his son Jehoram. We read about this in 2 Kings 8:16 and 17. In the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, having been king of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, began to reign as king of Judah. He reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. All the language here clearly refers to the start of his sole reign, which lasted for 8 years. This synchronism is only possible if, from this point, Judah changed to the non-accession year method. Harmony is only possible if both kingdoms reckoned by the non-accession year system. In fact, we discover that from this point until the fall of Israel, the lengths of the reigns of the kings of Judah and Israel do not show the characteristic 1-year difference per reign, implying that they must now follow the same method. 2 Kings chapters 9 to 11 show us that Jehu began his reign over Israel in the same year that Athaliah began her reign over Judah, since Jehu killed Ahaziah of Judah and Joram of Israel on the very same day. Since Israel used non-accession year dating, the first year of Jehu is also the last, that is, the 12th year of his predecessor Joram. We will now look at the time in Judah corresponding to these 12 years of Joram in Israel, which are reckoned inclusively. 2 Kings 3:1 tells us that Joram began his reign over Israel in the 18th year of the 22-year reign of Jehoshaphat over Judah, saying, "Now Jehoram the son of Ahab became king over Israel at Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat king of Judah, and reigned 12 years." This means that Jehoshaphat was reigning for the first 5 years of Joram's reign, if reckoned inclusively, as confirmed by 2 Kings 8:16. Then, after Jehoshaphat, 2 Kings 3:1 tells us there was the 8-year sole reign of Jehoram. 2 Kings 8:26 tells us that this was followed by the 1-year reign of Ahaziah of Judah. Now, if either of these reigns of Jehoram and Ahaziah in Judah were on the accession year system, we would have a contradiction, as these periods could not possibly fit within Joram's 12 years. This means that Jehoram must have changed Judah's system from accession year to non-accession year dating. We will see that system continues in Judah for the next 4 reigns. The reason for this change is evident. Jehoram's father, Jehoshaphat, had tried to build unity with Israel, with the royal families intermarrying. We read about Jehoram's marriage in 2 Kings 8:18. We read about the marriage of Jehoram's son Ahaziah in 2 Kings 8:26. We see in 2 Kings 8:16 that he even adopted the same names for their children. 2 Kings 8:29 and 2 Chronicles 18:1 and 2 tell us that Jehoram also exchanged visits with Israel. 2 Chronicles 20:35-36 tells us how he made joint foreign trading ventures. 1 Kings 22:2-4 shows how he even went into battle with Israel. Now, this all seems positive. But Israel, with their evil kings like Ahab, heavily involved in false religion, were the leading force of this coalition, as we read about in 2 Kings 8:27 and 2 Chronicles 18:2 and 3. All of this, you see, was leading Judah to compromise and was causing her prophets to rebuke her, such as in 2 Chronicles 19:2 and 2 Chronicles 20:37. In 2 Chronicles 21:12-15, we read how Elijah prophesied that judgment would come upon him from the Lord.
Because you have not walked in the ways of Jehoshaphat your father, or in the ways of Asa king of Judah, but have walked in the way of the kings of Israel, and have made Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to play the harlot, like the harlotry of the house of Ahab, behold, the Lord will strike your people with a serious affliction, and you will become very sick with a disease of your intestines.
2 Chronicles 21:16 and 17 then tells how the Philistines and Arabians, who had been tributaries under his father Jehoshaphat, now attacked Jerusalem and carried away treasure and all but one of his sons. In particular, Athaliah, the evil and strong-willed daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, became the wife of Jehoshaphat's son, Jehoram, as we read in 2 Kings 8:18 and 26. It's therefore to be expected that he would adopt the ways of Israel. In fact, 2 Kings 8:18 expressly states that Jehoram walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. This is the first time this phrase was used of a king of Judah. One of these ways was the use of the non-accession year dating system. Hello, I'm Derek Walker. I'm the pastor of the Oxford Bible Church. Today I want to introduce you to what I believe is a very special book called The Keys of Time, a revelation of Bible chronology. This book will give you a thorough grounding in the exciting subject of Bible chronology, revealing the keys by which you can unlock the treasure chest of God's Word concerning its revelation of time. And so we start, you see, by looking at the major keys that will unlock this treasure chest, like the fact that all time is based on the creation week, and one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and we look into the Jubilee and how that also unlocks how God measures time. And we look at the principle of unreckoned time. And as we see the whole revelation of God in history and time fit together perfectly, we will get out of this, we'll get a revelation of the glory of God as the sovereign Lord of time, the God who is working out his purposes of grace in his perfect time, according to his redemption timetable. So through this book, God will impart to you a rich understanding of the times, giving you a fresh revelation of the special time in which we're now living near the end of the age. And it will prepare you for the momentous events that are just ahead, because we are living in the last days, and we need to understand the times that we're living in, and we need to understand God's revelation of time in the Bible. And having discovered the keys and God's framework of time, we then go through each period of history, starting from Adam to Abraham, and then from Abraham to the Exodus, and then from the Exodus to the dedication of Solomon's temple, and then the period of time leading up to the decree to restore Jerusalem by Artaxerxes, and then finally Daniel's 70 weeks that take us to the coming of the Messiah himself and his death and resurrection. We look and we show how all the pieces fit together perfectly into God's framework of time, and by the end of the book you will know how to get the date of every event, every major event in the Bible, and how all these events fit together. And so this will enrich your understanding of the whole Bible and how it all fits together perfectly. And there are DVDs that go with this book that will enhance your study of it.